Well, welcome everyone to this emergency hands-off Cuba meeting. My name is Rob Miller. I'm the director of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, and we are organising this meeting this evening. It's been called in response particularly to Donald Trump's latest executive order against Cuba, where he ludicrously calls Cuba a threat to the United States national security. This new order is another serious escalation of the US economic warfare against the island. And it's a dangerous threat to the lives and the well-being of the Cuban people. We're going to hear tonight about this from our great lineup of guests. Some will be joining us a little later on because I know they're in various meetings, and people will explain the gravity of this situation. But I think most crucially, we will look at how we can organise and campaign in response to this latest aggression from the United States and in support of the Cuban people. Just quickly before we start, housekeeping, just to let you know, keep an eye on the questions box below because we'll be posting links about actions and campaigns there. And we want to finish the meeting by 8 o'clock at the latest. So that's our plan. Our very first speaker, it's a real honour that she's with us tonight. It's Her Excellency Ismara Vargas, Cuba's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Ismara joins us at a really difficult moment for Cuba, as the new US measures threaten fuel supplies, electricity supplies, healthcare, food supplies, and the daily life of Cubans across the island. Ismara, we know this is an incredibly difficult time for you and all the embassy staff as well, as I know you are worried about your friends and your family on the island. And I want to extend all of our solidarity to you and our love to you all at this time. So Ismara, thank you for joining us. Over to you now.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for convening this meeting with such urgency. And once again, thank you for your incredible support, and your love is felt. And as we have said many times, we need you and we count on the Cuba Solidarity Campaign. So these are very hard times, tough times. And this is the moment in which we need our friends the most. And we also need the international community and everyone here in the UK to understand what is really going on. And we want everybody not to be misled by the media, which, as you know, sometimes put forward propaganda instead of accurate information. I want to recognize the vital presence here of our friends from the trade union movement. And also, I wish to thank the members of parliament who will be joining us, as you mentioned, probably later on. They all continue to stand on the side of justice within the British Parliament. And we, as you said, we meet tonight under circumstances of extreme gravity. As you all know, Cuba, my country, has resisted the economic, commercial, and financial blockade for more than 60 years now. Actually, almost 70 years. But we are facing today, following the announcements of the last few days, what we are facing today represents a dangerous and qualitative escalation. On 29 January, President Trump announced a new executive order. In this document, he has declared a supposed national emergency to justify the unjustifiable, the imposition of punitive trade tariffs on imports from any country that supplies oil to Cuba. Let us be under no illusions about what this means. The objective, as stated clearly by our revolutionary government, is to impose an absolute siege on fuel supplies. They seek to cut off our power. They want to paralyze our transport, our agriculture, our hospitals. We are talking about human lives. This is not something to be wandering around or to play games. This is very serious. To justify this atrocity, the White House has resorted once again to the most cynical of lies. The text of the order classifies Cuba as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. I say this with absolute clarity. They know they are lying. The president himself and his cabinet are fully aware that no one believes this mendacious argument. How can a small island which sanctions no one, which bombs no one, which exports doctors and not arms, be a threat to the greatest nuclear superpower in history? Cuba is a country of peace, a country that defends the proclamation of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We are not a threat. By no means we are a threat. We are the example that a different path, far from imperialist hegemony, is possible and necessary. And that is precisely what they cannot forgive. This new measure is not only an attack against Cuba, it is a flagrant violation of international law and a blackmail against the sovereignty of third states. The United States is today arrogating to itself the right to dictate with which nations, the United Kingdom, Europe, or any other country in the world may trade. That is unacceptable. They have failed for 67 years in their attempt to destroy our revolutionary process. They have failed to make us surrender through hunger. And now, having failed to break the will of the Cuban people, they resort to brute force against our energy partners. Dear friends, this economic war is now accompanied by fire and blood. We cannot speak of the blockade tonight without speaking of the unprovoked, illegal, and criminal attacks carried out by the US against our sister nation, Venezuela. Tonight, with pain and rage in our hearts, we pay tribute to the 32 Cuban internationals who lost their lives in these cowardly bombings. We also mourn the Venezuelan military personnel and the innocent civilians who were massacred in this act of imperial madness. Their blood is on the hands of those in Washington who believe the world is their backyard. The kidnapping of President Maduro and Cilia Flores is not just an attack on Venezuela, it is an assault on the sovereignty of every nation in the global south. It is a gangster act that seeks to decapitate a sovereign government and replace it with colonial rule. They attack Venezuela for its resources, and they attack Cuba for our example. Friends, the situation is critical. This economic asphyxiation seeks to provoke real suffering for millions of people. However, imperialism is mistaken once again if it believes that pain will bring us to our knees. We shall face this new onslaught with firmness and equanimity. And we need the world to raise its voice. We need you from trade unions. We need you from within the British Parliament and from everywhere. We need your solidarity more than ever. We need you to reject these illegal tariffs and defend your own right to trade with Cuba. The international community faces a choice: allow the law of the jungle and abuse to prevail, or defend sanity and solidarity. We have already made our decision. No matter how dark they try to make our horizon, reason and justice are absolutely on our side. Venceremos. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ismara, for those inspiring and strong words. And as I said before, we send you personally, all your staff, your friends and colleagues and compatriots, all our love and solidarity. The Cuba Solidarity Campaign has launched a call for peace and sovereignty in response to Trump's executive order. Details of how you can sign this call are in the questions box, or should be in the question box now. The call's been already signed by thousands of people, including hundreds of members of parliament, parliamentarians from other houses, from other parliaments, councillors, academics, personalities, and so on, and all the British trade unions, including UNISON, who Andrea represents tonight, and the TUC itself. And if you haven't already signed that call for peace and sovereignty, you can do so tonight using the links in the box, or go on the Cuba Solidarity campaign website. Sign the call for peace and sovereignty, share it with your friends, your colleagues, your family, colleagues at work, and so on and so forth. We really need to build that broad base of opposition to Trump's aggression against Cuba. Our next speaker is Lindsey, the convener of the Stop the War Coalition. CSC has supported two recent demonstrations in support of Venezuela against the bombings and the kidnapping of Maduro and Celia Flores. And those demonstrations were called by the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign and Stop the War. And I'm sure Lindsey is going to talk about the escalation of, in the wider context of US militarization and interventions across the globe. And of course, most importantly, the importance of building a broad anti-war response. Over to you, Lindsey.
Thanks very much, Rob. And it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. And it's very heartening to hear Ismara speak and to hear what the concerns and the worries of the people of Cuba are, because this is just the latest in the criminal and gangster-like behaviour that we've seen from Donald Trump, particularly in this year, 2026, when he launched the kidnap of Maduro, the bombing of Venezuela, which, as Ismara said, killed, among others, 32 Cuban nationals. But this is now, he's determined to do this not just in what he regards as his backyard, and he's recently reaffirmed that he's got the corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which was American imperialism claiming its rights over the whole of the Latin American continent. But he's also now on the rampage across the world. And if you just think of Cuba for a minute and the cutting of the oil and the blockade, which has gone on for 67 years. But if you think about this whole process of blockades and sanctions, they've become more and more deadly, more and more aimed at the ordinary people of any particular country where they happen. We remember I remember them when they first occurred against Iraq in 1991 at the end of the Gulf War. What was the consequence? The consequence is that you have the medical failures, that people can no longer get medicine, they can no longer get electricity, they can no longer get pencils in schools. The people of Cuba are going to suffer terribly as a result of this cutting off of the oil and only leaving it with 2 weeks supplies of oil at the moment, and threatening Mexico if it sends any oil, and doing all the other things that they're doing. And this will mean real material differences to the people of Cuba. It will mean people becoming more ill. It will mean people suffering in all sorts of ways, not being able to get food, not being able to get transport. So this is deliberately to hit the ordinary people in order to achieve regime change. That is what it is all about. And we have to be very, very strongly against it. We know the whole history of American imperialism in the region. We know that in my lifetime, one of the formative experiences in my life was the coup in Chile in 1973 by Pinochet against the Allende government. And they talk about brutality in other parts of the world, but that was a coup that led to tens of thousands of people being killed and many more being exiled. So we know what they do, and we know that it's always that they try to blame the people that they're attacking for being aggressive. I noticed even tonight that the Americans have just shot down an Iranian drone because they're also talking about military action against Iran. And they say they've done this because it was acting aggressively against a US aircraft carrier. You might think that the acting aggressively comes from the aircraft carrier, which is going around the world threatening various countries at various times. And indeed, recently we had a big fleet in Trinidad aimed at threatening Venezuela. So this is what we're faced with. Why is it happening? It's happening because US hegemony is actually declining. The whole period of neoliberalism, when you had the one superpower, and after the Cold War, and where the United States was by far the biggest economic and military power, that is in decline. And this is why Trump is responding in the way that he is. He wants to keep particularly China and Chinese investment out of the whole of Latin America. He wants to protect interests in any way that he thinks fit. And that's why he wants Greenland, so that he can have military bases in the Arctic. All of these things are something where we're seeing him attacking country after country after country. So these are all very, very serious questions for us. We are in a very dangerous and unstable world, probably the most dangerous and unstable world that we've seen for certainly since, again, the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the early 1960s. And this is something where we have to build, firstly, solidarity across different countries, solidarity with the people of Cuba, solidarity with the people of Venezuela, everywhere else in Latin America that is potentially under attack. But we also have to build a very big anti-war movement in this country and around the world. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to build our international links. We have an international peace conference, which we had one in Paris late last year, and we're having another one in London in June, which I think can bring together people faced with these attacks and also faced with the own domestic attacks, because at the same time that Trump is attacking other countries, he's also attacking his own people, not just in Minneapolis with the shooting of protesters and the hounding of migrants, many of them from Latin America, but also in terms of people's living standards. Keir Starmer, who supports Trump every inch of the way, whether it's over Cuba, Venezuela, he wouldn't condemn the illegal action in Venezuela. He is doing the same to his own people, that there is going to be more and more money spent on the military and on so-called defense than there is on education or health or any of these things. So we have a very, very big job to do to show solidarity with the people immediately under attack, wherever it is going to be. And unfortunately, there's a bigger and bigger number of countries that he's attacking, but also to build a movement here which can link up with people fighting over all these issues. The TUC passed a resolution calling for wages, not weapons. I think that the slogan, and welfare, not warfare, and solidarity with all those under attack from Trump, that has to be our cry, our war cry, because we have to get ourselves on the war footing against these people who want to bring war to everybody. So thank you very much, Rob, and good luck to everybody in building this movement.
Thank you, Lindsey, for those brilliant words, and thank you for all the work that you and your colleagues at Stop the War have done for so many years and can continue to do. There are reports about the two recent Venezuela demonstrations in our magazine, Cuba C, which is this magazine. And as I've mentioned it, well, you can't see it very well, but there it is, Cuba C magazine. I'd like to take this opportunity before our next speaker to make an appeal for people to join Cuba Solidarity Campaign. I know many of you here tonight will already be members, but if you're not a member, please consider joining. It's £20 a year if you're waged, £8 a year if you're unwaged. You receive our magazine 4 times a year. Also some freebies, badges and bags. We like to encourage members. Details about membership and affiliations are in the question box below right now and on the CSC website. Joining Cuba Solidarity Campaign really is the first and the best way to support Cuba at this time. So please do join the campaign. We need you and Cuba needs you right now. Okay, our next speaker, I'm really pleased to introduce her. It's Andrea Egan, who has recently been elected and taken up her post as the General Secretary of Britain's biggest public sector union, UNISON. Andrea will speak a bit about the importance of trade union solidarity at this time. Thank you for joining us. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. Friends, comrades, can you hear me? Super, thank you very much. I am really pleased to be able to join you tonight and lend UNISON's voice of solidarity and support to Cuba. This is my first international meeting as the newly elected General Secretary of UNISON. As Britain's largest public sector union, UNISON has a long and proud history of solidarity with Cuba. For more than 25 years, we've built close bonds of friendship with Cuba's health and public administration unions. These are not abstract links, they are practical, human and life-saving. In 2000, UNISON sent reconditioned ambulances to Cuba to help the health service and recover from the devastating impact of the so-called special period. More recently, working with Cuba Solidarity Campaign, we've helped raise over £250,000 and send 5 containers of life-saving medical aid to the island. But solidarity with Cuba also means recognising what Cuba gives to the world. And despite facing decades of blockade, Cuba has sent tens of thousands of doctors, nurses and health workers to communities hit by war, disease and disaster, often places others won't go. The Cuban medical brigades have treated millions of people, responded to earthquakes, hurricanes and epidemics, and they've supported public health systems across the global south. That is internationalism in action, and it creates a debt of solidarity that we have a responsibility to repay. Through our exchanges with sister unions, our campaigns and our work with the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, UNISON members understand the daily reality faced by the Cuban people under blockade. And I saw that reality for myself when I joined a Northwest UNISON delegation to Cuba in May of 2023. And I witnessed firsthand the shortages that affect every Cuban family. We delivered medical aid to a polyclinic where staff told us how the blockade makes it impossible to obtain even the most basic items, things as simple as surgical thread for stitches. And yet, what struck me most was not despair, but the resilience. One evening, we attended a CDR neighbourhood party, an ordinary street gathering organised by local people to welcome us. Families of all ages came together, and then suddenly the power went out, but the party didn't stop. The people just got the mobile phones out and the torches on the mobiles to light the street. A young boy played the violin and others sang. And they carried on together until the electricity turned back on. And That is the spirit of Cuba. And that spirit is now being tested to the limit. You know, Donald Trump's latest executive order cutting off oil supplies to Cuba takes the cruelty of the blockade to a new and dangerous level. This isn't about security. Cuba is not a threat. Cuba sends doctors, not bombs, around the world. And UNISON has proudly welcomed Cuban doctors to our conferences. And these measures don't just harm Cuban families, they also threaten Cuba's ability to continue their international medical and humanitarian work that saves lives far beyond Cuba's borders. Strangling Cuba's economy means undermining global solidarity at a time when the world needs it the most. Cutting off oil will not just turn off lights, it'll stop incubators, life support machines, and water pumps. Food will rot in fridges and lives will be lost. That is collective punishment, plain and simple. In Cuba, I was deeply honoured to receive the Solidarity Medal on behalf of UNISON, recognising our long-standing support. Again and again, we were thanked simply for standing in solidarity with them. And it showed me how much international solidarity matters, how powerful it is to know that you're not alone. And that matters. And it matters now more than ever. The British trade union movement has always been internationalist. Solidarity with Cuba is a part of that tradition. And now is the time to turn that solidarity into action by raising our voices, mobilising our members, and demanding that the British government and the international community speak out. Hands off Cuba. Cuba is not alone, and UNISON will continue to stand in solidarity. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrea, for those lovely words. And it's wonderful to know that 1 million trade union members from UNISON and trade unionists across our country are standing alongside their brothers and sisters in Cuba. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you personally, but also all your members, your branches, your regions, for the wonderful support over so many years. UNISON was at the forefront of solidarity with Cuba, going way back. As Andrea said, together with UNISON and other trade unions and people like yourselves, we've raised over £250,000 for the Cuba Vive medical aid appeal, which has now sent 5 40-foot shipping containers packed full of life-saving medical aid to the island. There's another container on the seas now arriving in Cuba, hopefully around the 12th of February, and we plan to send more and more. Please do have a look at supporting the Cuba Vive appeal. There are details in the question box below. Thanks to everyone who's supported it so far, but if you haven't, please help us. Details are below, and we need all the support we can get to help the people of Cuba at this time. Thank you, Andrea, one more time. Our next speaker is Steve Witherden MP. He's the MP for Montgomeryshire and Glyndur. He's also the chairperson of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Cuba. Steve has been doing amazing work in Parliament, pressing our government to speak out against the blockade, against Trump's recent aggressions. If you haven't seen it, there's a link to statements issued by the All-Party Parliamentary Group and MPs in the box below. And I'm really pleased that Steve, along with colleagues, has just tabled an early day motion in Parliament, which I know has already been signed by 20-25 members of Parliament. I hope you will all get involved in lobbying your own MPs in your constituencies to sign that early day motion. I'm sure Steve will tell us a bit more about it. And over to you, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for that introduction, Rob. So, yes, Steve Witherden, Member of Parliament for Montgomeryshire and Glyndur in Wales, and recently elected Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cuba, APPG, after previously having been the Vice Chair for a year. So just wanted to talk a little bit, first of all, about, what an APPG is. It's an all-party parliamentary group, and we have over 70 members. I believe it's from 8 different political parties. So it's a cross-party body. Not everyone has the same views on Cuba in this instance, in the APPG, as in any APPG. We count among our members the recent defector from the Conservatives to Reform, Andrew Rosendale, and I think his views on Cuba are very, very different to my own. So it's one where we're always looking to, I'm a Labour MP, but I'm always, liaising with colleagues from multiple different political parties. Obviously Jeremy's in the meeting. Jeremy's also a member. So like I say, about 7, 8 different parties represented on that body. The role has morphed somewhat in the current crisis. I like to think that we have adapted. We've kind of modified our approach according to the challenges we would face. When I was vice chair, I was delighted to host Her Excellency Ismara Vargas in my constituency in the town of Machynlleth, where we have an annual festival, El Sueño Existe, where we celebrate, dance, song, poetry from Latin America, and that was a wonderful, happy event. On another occasion, I accompanied, still in Wales, but into a neighbouring constituency, I accompanied Her Excellency to the National Library of Wales, where we, had a full tour of that amazing building, and then Her Excellency donated the complete works of Jose Marti to the library. We also then went round Aberystwyth University, looking at the agronomy department, and I'm looking forward to welcoming a Cuban delegation of artists to my hometown, Llangollen, where we have the International Eisteddfod every July, and that had been really the main focus of the APPG. Not the only focus, but concentrating on social, cultural exchanges and visits. Recently hosted Fidel Castro's grandson, who's an esteemed academic and doctor in his own right, to speak about his work and also about the legacy of his grandfather in Parliament. That was very, very recently. And these are the things that we've normally been doing with the APPG, but and enter Donald Trump, enter Donald Trump and his outrageous, bullying, thuggish behaviour, not just in his own hemisphere, but globally, as reaching far out into other continents as well. So, as Rob outlined, we've taken lots and lots of actions just within the last month. We've written to the Prime Minister. That's been signed by many MPs. It's a letter, we put that up publicly, we published it, and we were calling for much more robust wording on the defence of Cuba, on the defence of international law in relation to comments that were made in a recent interview when the Prime Minister was asked about the Trump's illegal invasion of Venezuela. As well as that, as Rob mentioned, we've also tabled a recent early day motion, which, just like I was saying about the APPG a moment ago, has had broad party support. The co-sponsors, we've got Liberal Democrats, we've got SNP, as well as Labour and other parties, not just who've signed it, but who are the co-sponsors. Last week, I also had a meeting with Minister Elmore over at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and that was specifically to discuss UK-Cuba bilateral relations, to hear from him on things like how much of our aid to the Caribbean, in relation to Hurricane Melissa, how much had got through, to Cuba, how that had been distributed. We also wanted to see firm commitments and assurances from him that there would be no change to UK policy in relation to the annual vote in the United Nations General Assembly on lifting the blockade. Obviously, we've stood firm on that. We've stood with Cuba on that, but sadly this year, in the most recent vote, a lot of countries who would normally have abstained or who would normally have voted with Cuba sadly did not. So we were very keen to get assurances from Minister Elmore that our position wouldn't change as a country, and we received that. Only today, this morning, I tabled an urgent question to discuss the situation, the threats that Cuba are facing in the House of Commons. Sadly, that urgent question wasn't selected, but we've agreed we're going to be putting it in again tomorrow, and we're going to keep putting it in until we get it, or until this current crisis, these current threats that Trump is making abate. And sadly, I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. I've also, not so much as part of the APPG, but as myself as a backbench MP, I've asked 3 questions from the floor of the House of Commons. In them, I've managed to call Trump a bandit, a bully, a thug. I haven't got gangster in yet, member of a criminal gang. I'm hoping he's as thin-skinned and venal as everyone says he is, and I'm hoping he's heard it. But I'll continue to call him out. I'll continue to use my platform to call him out from the floor of the House of Commons, the threat that he poses to Cuba and many, many other countries as well. And I've named Cuba, I've named Panama, I've named Colombia, and obviously Greenland, just as a few of the countries in which he has threatened. And I have also, in my most recent speaking opportunity on this topic of Trump's aggression, was a Prime Minister's question where I asked the Prime Minister to impose retaliatory tariffs on Trump for his constant threat of tariffs to this country and many other countries around the world. I think I would conclude by just speaking a little bit about Mexico. So I'm the chairperson of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cuba, but I'm also a member, not an officer, but I'm a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Mexico. I think that, I don't think, I know we've also, and you will all have seen it yourselves, that Trump has, turned his pressure onto Mexico as a country which is still supplying oil to Cuba. That is where his aggression, that is where his threats are now being focused. So I think it's very important that we also, speak up and defend Mexico, who are in a very, very lonely position. Don't seem to have as many British politicians as concerned about the threats that they are receiving when you compare it with Greenland, which I think is wrong. It should be consistent. International law should be upheld, and this, the bullying, threatening behaviour against Mexico has got to stop. Mexico should be, should not face any reprisal for trading in oil or anything else with Cuba or any other country that it chooses to do so. So I think that could form, one of the next big focuses for myself. Working with that other APPG and my own. One of the things that I've been considering doing, and I'm trying to drum up support for, is a letter from the chairs of the all-party parliamentary groups for all the countries and regions that have been explicitly threatened. So myself as the Cuba chair, obviously liaising with the Mexico APPG chair, and there is also an APPG for Greenland. But Panama, I don't think Colombia, certainly Panama, doesn't have its own APPG, but there is a Latin American APPG, for the continent as a whole, again, of which I'm not an officer, but I'm also a member. So I think that's going to be one of my aims moving forward, as some of the other speakers have said this evening, trying to build a broad coalition, a broad, consensus of people who may not agree on absolutely everything, but we all agree that we need to stand up in the most robust terms possible to the horrific behaviour of Donald Trump in relation to Cuba and other countries. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Steve, for your strong words, and most of all, thank you for all the work you're doing in Parliament. I know you've worked tirelessly on this alongside us. I mean, look out for the early day motion that will probably go live tomorrow. We will be publishing details and organising a letter writing online action so that you can contact your own members of Parliament. It's very important that people in constituencies contact their own members of Parliament, because they're much more likely to listen to their own constituents, asking them to sign early day motions and make statements in support of Cuba and against these horrible measures. Thank you, Steve, for that. Our next speaker doesn't need a lot of introduction, so I won't spend much time on it. He's a long-standing supporter of Cuba. He's also a patron of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, and he's a consistent voice for peace and international solidarity. A big welcome to you, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much, Rob, and absolute pleasure to be here. And it's great to follow Steve. Thanks, Steve, for what you said and what you do as chair of the Cuba group. You're absolutely brilliant at it and very, very effective, and it's a pleasure to work with you. Can we say special message of solidarity to Excellency Ambassador Ismara? Ambassador, to the people of Cuba, our support, our friendship, and our solidarity. And thank you for all that you do in making sure that we do understand what's going on in Cuba. And it's great that Andrea chose her first international speech to be on Cuba. I'm so pleased you're General Secretary, Andrea, and we're going to be working together for a long, long time to come. So it's great to be here. We're in absolutely desperate times. The Trump doctrine is one of total disrespect for any aspect of international law, international order of any sort, not much respect for the US Constitution. And at home, he's pursuing a policy with ICE attacking anyone that they perceive to be a migrant or a refugee, pursuing the most hateful racist agenda on the streets of the United States, and globally threatening everybody, and then throwing his toys out the pram when he wasn't given the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a very strange times in which we live. His threats to Greenland are obvious and completely untenable. Greenland has a right to decide its own future, and that is not the decision of Donald Trump. That's for the people of Greenland and Denmark to decide what their future is in the future. What it's really about, of course, is minerals and oil. And if anyone has any doubts about Donald Trump and what he's doing, it's not random. It's not idiosyncratic. It is actually a very carefully thought out strategy. It just doesn't look like it. If you read the national security document of November of last year, it's very clear. It's a new Monroe Doctrine, Monroe with bells on, basically, giving them the right to intervene anywhere in what they call the Western Hemisphere if they believe any of those countries harbor what they call foreign interests. What you really read there is Cuba, is Nicaragua, is Venezuela, is Colombia, and so on. And that so-called right to intervene is enshrined there, which is why he sent an aircraft carrier and so many troops down to the southern Caribbean. But it also extends on a wider stage all around the world, giving themselves that right to intervene. And so be aware of what that strategy is about. His government has also just signed a massive deal to sell arms to Israel, huge supply of weapons to Israel, including large numbers of helicopters to take part in further raids in Gaza. On top of the 71,000 already dead in Gaza, there are many dying at the hands of American and, yes, British weapons at the present time, as well as the continued rising death toll in the West Bank and the threats to the refugee camps. So that is what the Trump foreign policy is about. The arrest of President Maduro and then oiking him off to a court in New York was like something out of a remake of Ben-Hur or something, where the big powerful person grabs the enemy and takes them there and parades them naked through the streets almost. And that was what they did to Maduro, and no doubt there'll be a show trial coming up. And so it's Venezuela first, but it's Cuba they're really after, because they feel personally and collectively aggrieved that from the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Cuba is still there, providing free healthcare, free education, good quality housing, full employment. What is there not to like about that? Well, it's a threat by example, because they want a country dominated by casinos, American hotels, the arms trade, and all the things that they can make lots of money out of, like private healthcare and big pharma. Cuba is a threat by example. And so as if the blockade since 1959 hasn't been bad enough, they're now saying that any country that supplies anything to Cuba is in the crosshairs of the United States. First up is Mexico. US is near neighbor. And Mexico has obviously a huge trading relationship with the USA. 80% of all Mexican trade is with the USA. A very large number of Mexicans live in the USA. So it's not difficult for the USA to make life very hard for Mexico. One, don't accept imports from Mexico, particularly of cars and car parts, and a huge number of agricultural products as well. Secondly, don't allow Mexicans to send money back home for to support their families and communities there. And so I think we say hats off and support to the government of Mexico, Claudia, the president, and the work that she's done and the determination she's shown to defend her country and stand up against what the United States is doing. And so they've said they would take sanctions against anyone that supplies oil to Cuba. I just got a message from Claudia Turbot Deloff, who's in Cuba at the moment. She sent me a long message about what things were like there. But what she said was she was impressed by the resilience of the people to stand up against what the US is trying to do to them. That has to be the message. But I think we should say a message to our government. Why do we have such supine indifference to the injustices around the world, the preparedness of Britain, apparently under Starmer, to get involved in wars anywhere the USA wants it, and then have nothing to say about the threats being made about Cuba? Just think if we had a different government that said to the US, okay, is that your attitude to Cuba? The first thing we will do is send vessels to Cuba carrying medicine, carrying food, and sending oil to Cuba so that the economy can survive. What is wrong with the European governments, all of whom theoretically support normal relations with Cuba, in not taking something a bit more concrete and a bit more specific about it? And so the Cuban people are determined, are strong, and are going to survive. Of course they are. They've been through all this before, but they do need our solidarity and our help, not to tell them what to do, not to tell them how to find their battles, but to give them that solidarity. So to everyone watching this, be strong, be determined, be clear, read Cuba C, and tell your MP to say something about it, do something about it, raise the issue in Parliament, put the British government under some pressure. If you believe in international law, then make sure Cuba isn't isolated and isn't starved into submission. I know Cuba never will be, and we'll make sure we're there alongside them in this great big battle. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, as ever. It's always wonderful to be in meetings with you, to hear your words of solidarity and commitment. It's you really are a testament to what a politician should be. Thank you so much. Our final speaker is Kevin Courtney, who's was until recently the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. And I'm really pleased that since he's retired, he's become the chairperson of the Cuba Solidarity Campaign, which is our gain. I know Kevin is going to speak a bit about our priorities as a campaign at this moment, and how everyone here on this call can help take action, which is the key thing in support of Cuba at this time. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Rob, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for being on the call. Great to be with all of you. Great to be with Andrea and Her Excellency Ismara, with Steve, with Jeremy, with Lindsey. I was born in 1959, the same year as the Cuban Revolution. They have maintained that blockade against the island for the whole of my lifetime. There is a quote from 1960, the year I was 1, that the purpose of the blockade is to bring about hunger, desperation, and overthrow of the government. The Americans have always known what they're trying to do, but they have failed. They failed for 66 years. Now, Donald Trump escalated dramatically during his first term when he put Cuba on the state sponsor of terrorism list, and I want to come back to that. But when I was in Cuba, and Andrea's been there recently, and Jeremy's just reporting from a recent visit, I was in Cuba in October. So before this recent escalation, but still in the midst of everything Trump was doing. And what I saw was resilience. I saw wonderful schools, fantastic relations between teachers and children, but I also saw blackouts for hour after hour. no resources in the schools, impacts on food supplies. The attack on Cuba is huge, but the US has still failed. They have not succeeded in wearing down the Cuban people, and long may that continue. But we have to be aware that Donald Trump, he is the far right. He's unpredictable. We don't know what he's going to do next. You see what he's doing, and other people have said this in his own country. Those ICE goons in Minneapolis arresting black and brown people, murdering Rene Good and Alex Pretty. We see the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela, and then the launch of this new extended phase of the attack on Cuba, as well as the attack on Greenland. It's astonishing. And what we have to say to our government is you have to stand up to bullies. If you let them get away with bullying Cuba, he will go on to bully someone else. We've also got to say to the government that they have to reject the lies. The lies in this document that Cuba has got Hamas and Hezbollah on the island. There are 250 Palestinian students training to be doctors on the island. That's what Cuba is bringing to the world, not terrorism, but training doctors. We have to get our government to reject the lie that Cuba is a state sponsor of terrorism. They put Cuba on that list because there were guerrillas from Colombia in Havana, but they were there for peace talks. Cuba, along with Norway, was asked by the UN to be a sponsor of the peace talks in Colombia. And that's what those guerrillas were doing in Havana, was preparing for peace talks. So again, it's Cuba that is promoting peace around the world. And we have to get our government to say this. When the US government says that Cuba is a threat to the US, our government has to be clear. It's the US that sends troops around the world. It's Cuba that sends doctors around the world. So they have to reject those lies. And we have to demand that our government acts. They have to stand up to bullies, and that is in the interests of the people of Cuba. But it's in the interests of the people of the whole world that they stand up to Donald Trump's bullying. And so there are two strands of the work that Cuba Solidarity Campaign is doing at the moment. And I want the people on the call to support both strands. There is a strand of putting demands on our government, that they have to speak out. They have to support Cuba. They have to say that they oppose US intervention. And that's the Cuba Solidarity's campaign call for peace and sovereignty. Look in the chat section now. Find the place where you can find that. It's on there under the answers. You sign it right now. Sign that call for peace and sovereignty, and ask your friends and family to sign it. Once we launch the action for the early day motion, demand that your MP signs that early day motion. Those are both routes to put pressure on our government to say they have to make a stand, and they have to stand up for Cuba's sovereignty. That's not standing up necessarily for Cuba's system. I support Cuba's system, but you can support Cuba's against American aggression, whatever you think of the peculiar. It's for the Cuban people to decide what happens in Cuba, not the bully in the White House. But the second strand of the work that we're doing at the moment, as well as putting pressure on our government, is we are collecting material aid. And I have in the past thought of this as just another way of raising the political. And it is a way of raising the political. If you get someone to give some money for the medical aid, you are raising the question of Cuba. But I tell you right now, it is life-saving. Rob spoke about the fact that we have containers of medical supplies going to Cuba. We raised about £250,000 last year. Thank you to UNISON in particular, but to other unions as well that put money into that, as well as people that did collections. But we've got a way of multiplying up the value of that to send more value to Cuba. So I also want you to look in the Q&A and find the place where there's a link to the Cuba Vive appeal, because you can directly help to save lives in Cuba by supporting that campaign now. So those two strands, pressure on our government to stand up to bullying and to stand up for Cuba's sovereignty and peace, and directly aiding the Cuban people, aiding their fantastic medical system. But they now need our support in doing that. Please do both of those things. And like Rob said earlier, one way to do both is to join the Cuba Solidarity Campaign. And this magazine that you get when you're a member is fantastic and covers all of these things. So join the Cuba Solidarity Campaign as well. This is a dark moment for Cuba. And Ismara and Rob will be having all sorts, there are concerns about what comes next. What will Donald Trump do next? But you should have faith in the resilience of the Cuban people, the determination of the leaders of the Cuban people, and the faith that the Cuban people have in their sovereignty. And it is their hour of need. Do make sure that you take action on all of those points that we are raising. Please join the Cuba Solidarity Campaign and join in with these actions. Cuba Viva. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, Kevin, as always, and really clear and really concise messaging to everyone on this call about what you can do. And I really do hope that people hear what Kevin's saying and take action, however small it is. It helps, and it's so, so important. I said we'd finish by 8 o'clock, and I hope we will. I'm sure we will. I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. They've been excellent, from Lindsey, Andrea, Steve, Jeremy, Kevin, and especially to Ismara. We are with you with our love and solidarity, Ismara. But thank you to all our speakers and to everyone here joining tonight. Finally, then, in summing up, Trump's executive order is not about US security at all. It is about strangling a sovereign country and its people into submission. It is a collective punishment of all the Cuban people, and it must be resisted. The Cuban people have given so much to the world over the years, and you've heard much of that explained tonight. And we must now do absolutely everything we can in solidarity with them at this precarious time. There are simple things you can do, as have been outlined. Sign the call for peace and sovereignty, share it widely, put motions to your trade unions. You know what you can do, but please take that action. Pressure your members of parliament to stand up and take action. Pressure them to speak out against Trump and to oppose the blockade of Cuba. And when we launch the online letter writing actions in support of the early day motion, I hope that you will take that action, because reaching your own MPs from your own constituency is very, very important to make those actions successful. Please donate and support the appeal that Kevin spoke about, the Cuba Vive appeal. We need that support. We need campaigning over here, but we also need support to help with the resistance and give solidarity to the people. Cuba is not alone. We are all with the people of Cuba, and we are all in solidarity with Cuba. But solidarity only matters if we turn it into real action. Thank you so much to all our speakers and to all of you for joining us tonight. Hands off Cuba. Thank you.